I'm Jim Collison, and this is Gallup's Called to Coach, recorded on July 7th, 2022. Called to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you're listening live, we'd love to have your questions there in chat. If you're on our live page, there's a link to that chat right above me. Sign in with your YouTube account. We'd love to have your questions during the program. If you're listening after the fact, you can always send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to subscribe to Call the Coach on your favorite podcast app or right there on YouTube so you never miss an episode. Jo Self is my guest today. Her background is diverse, ranging from developing award-winning employee programs for the world's largest fast food restaurant company like Yum Brands to starting her own event business. She once moved to, hopefully not more than once, she moved to Peru in 2011. She built a top 50 startup tourism business there. In 2015, everything changed when she looked to Gallup to start her most recent path, one which is just not a job, but a calling. And practical strengths is the biggest part of that journey. She's also a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach. Her top 5 are strategic, activator, maximizer, communication, and ideation. Jo, welcome back to Called the Coach.
Saludos desde Mexico. So great to be here, Jim. I really appreciate it.
So great to have you, and great to have you a part of the program here. And good to catch up with you. Let's go back a little bit for you. Just give us, like, not like we've had any big events going on in the world or in your own life. Let's catch people up on you. Give us a little rundown on where you've come from the last couple of years.
Yeah, so it's been an incredible couple of years. I officially separated and divorced at the end of 2019, just before we went into pandemic and quarantine. I was living in Peru at the time, and have to say that the quarantine in Peru was pretty strict. I know there's a couple other countries around the world that had something similar, but we had a pretty strict one for 4 months. And it's one of the things where I talk about with my strengths. I have to say my strategic and my futuristic just had to go on hold. They had to go on pause. I had to dial up my connectedness, my adaptability, and just be okay with where I was, because I couldn't plan anything. And I could plan for really far things, but I couldn't plan for anything within any short amount of time. And so it was really frustrating for me. I have to say there was a moment where it got pretty grim. But at the end of the day, I just learned to be and did what I could. And I'd had the license from Gallup to write practical strengths. So I leaned into writing my book. I had time to do it. Got the first one out in March of 2021, which was on parenting. The pandemic also led me down paths I never thought I would take. I worked with a lot of individual coaches, primarily doing branding and business strategy through strengths. And then I got the call because of one being bilingual, being able to speak Spanish, and the other being in South America and also being a strengths coach. I got the call to partner on some projects for global corporations. And so I went down a corporate path, and I've been doing that ever since, working for a couple of international consulting agencies. And I love it. I never thought I'd be going down that path, but I absolutely love it. And I have to be grateful for what the pandemic did bring me, on the way. And then the other thing that came along with it is I finally had a chance to leave Peru. The opportunities that came during the pandemic gave me an opportunity to relocate myself for better positioning. Since a lot of my clients are in Mexico and in the US, Mexico is a much more central location for me. And that led me to Mexico, and I've been here since February.
So, and of course, that's gone super smooth for you as well.
Oh,
right?
Super smooth. Yes, I've been sharing a single room with my son since February. We're still looking for an apartment. 2 contracts have fallen through. It is a challenge, to say the least, but I'm really, I don't know, my positivity is taking over, and I'm being hopeful that in the next 2 weeks, something is going to work out and we will finally have a place to stay.
Good. Well, we're hoping for you on that. That's always it's they always say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I kind of say what doesn't kill you just doesn't kill you. And so,
Well,
I mean, it still is hard, right?
I have strategic number one, right? I have a ranger. I'm used to moving things around. You know those little puzzle boards where like you have one square blank and you have to keep moving everything around until you make the picture? Everybody's
Mhm.
like, "Oh, Joe, you're just on plan B." And I'm like, "I am on plan N." And I'm kind of sick of arranging, like moving the board around because that's kind of what I feel like I'm in perpetually right now.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for a moment to take a pause and just, focus on what I need to focus on.
How often you're bilingual, both English and Spanish? How often in your coaching do you get to use either or? If you were to give it a percentage of using them, how would that line up?
I would say right now, I'm probably 70% English, 30% Spanish, but I have two new clients in Mexico that'll be starting in the next couple of months. So I'll probably go to about 50-50 at that point.
Mm.
But it's definitely opened doors for me to be able to do this in both languages.
And
100%.
English is native for you, right? That was your first
Yes.
language?
Yes,
And so
absolutely.
how is it as you coach in both languages?
Mhm.
How does that, do you feel like you have an advantage because you know both? Or how does
It's,
that work for you?
it's really interesting. I do have an advantage. Obviously, I mean, it opens doors for me that may not open for other people. And I think that's true of any language, whether it be Spanish or French or Swahili. I mean, if you can do this in two languages, you've automatically got more opportunities out there for you. um, it's interesting from a language positioning too, and just how you translate things and trying to make sure that you're doing it, because one thing is a translation that can be kind of a literal translation, another is a translation that is culturally relevant, right? So that's one of those things that we run into all the time with strengths, is trying to find the right words, because sometimes the words that we use in strengths or the translations we have don't necessarily resonate. But that's going to be really difficult to do because every country is going to have some way they want to say it. It's not just because it's Spanish doesn't mean everyone who speaks Spanish says it the same way either, right? So you run into that, but it's been very helpful to do it. In fact, I certified for Gallup in the very first Spanish certification group in 2015. So I actually certified in Spanish.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that helps as well.
I well, I had found when I studied German, it actually helped with my English. Like, I never really understood why we did the things that we do in English. Then I studied German, and later on would study a little bit of Latin and some Greek when I went to school, when I went to college. In understanding those language principles or learning languages outside of your own native language helped me as I looked back at my own language and go,
Hmm.
"Oh, that makes sense why we do
Hmm.
it, why we say the things that we do say." Also, now that we have
Yeah.
7 different languages available for Called to Coach, and listening to those languages and watching the translators, it has come to my I mean, it's come to my attention just the challenge of those translations, and then, like you said, understanding those concepts in the language, and then Spanish is bigger it's a bigger language than English, right? There's more Spanish speakers, I think, than there are English speakers, not
It's
by a
close.
lot, but
It's pretty
it
close. It's pretty close.
it's
Spanish
pretty
is,
close. But
yeah.
that has dialects all around the world that, you're in Mexico but you came from Peru. You think that would
This,
work, but it doesn't
you would think
always,
it would
right?
work, but moving, I tell people all the time I speak Spanish, but I don't speak Mexican. I speak Peruvian,
Right,
right? And so I'm
right.
learning words all the time. And my son has been hysterical because he's actually adapted a little bit more quickly. So he throws out Mexican words much more easily than I do because I'm still very stuck in the Peruvian way of saying things. So yeah, so it lends. But I've always been fascinated by language. Language has just always been something that's fascinated me since I was a little kid. I watched Sesame Street. I mean, from 3 years old, I was obsessed with learning Spanish. Don't know why, don't know where it came from,
Yeah.
but I remember entrada, salida, and some little cartoon in Sesame Street. And from
Agua.
there, I
Mhm.
was hooked.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up watching the same Sesame Street you did, didn't have that same effect, and I lived in California. I probably should have
Right.
learned Spanish in the process. I think I've also learned that I think sometimes English speakers think, or even non-English speakers think we have this strengths language nailed down in English, and
Right.
we don't, right? There's still nuances to the way these themes work in individuals. You and I were having a pre-show conversation, and you were
Yeah.
giving me some insight, right? Just I was like, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." And
Right.
so, regardless of the language, the background, the custom, or the culture, I think there's importance in having these conversations, right, around what this
Yeah.
is, that it doesn't become an assumption. And this is the hard part culturally, is when someone says something that's culturally insensitive to your own culture and they're outside of that. Oftentimes they didn't mean to do that, but our reaction is important, right? I mean, you probably see this all the time, the reaction to what's being said.
Well, and I think, speaking Spanish, there are times when, because you speak a language pretty fluently, I will definitely not say I'm fluent, but I'm professionally fluent for sure, right? There's some cultural things, but there are cultural nuances to how you say things that I still get caught up in. And I'm still like, wait, but that's not what that word means, or I don't understand it that way. And it can create conflict. And a really super simple one is, in Spanish, you can say claro, or you can say por supuesto, for okay. Sure, okay. And in English, when you're talking to me and I'm acknowledging what you're saying and sort of um, going, yeah, sure, okay, okay, yeah, I got you, right? Like, I'm okay, okay. And it's just, I agree with you, I got it, I understand you, right? So because people would often make fun of my R's, I avoided claro and I would use por supuesto. And my ex-husband would always go, oh, of course you know everything. And I was like, I was just saying I agree with you. And then he had a conversation with another friend of mine who asked him what the difference was between claro and por supuesto, which in English we just learned both of them meant okay. They were the same thing. But claro is like, okay, I understand you. Por supuesto is like, duh, of course it is. And I'm
Right.
like,
Yes.
oh, that explains 2 years of misunderstandings when it could
Right.
have been cleared up if he had just understood that
Right.
I don't have those cultural nuances, and he
Mhm.
basically knows what it means and what am I trying to say. But he didn't speak English, so he didn't understand the difference of, how difficult it can be sometimes to manage those nuances, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
here I think
always
here in the
fun.
United States, we're changing cultures. The work culture is changing, and
Oh,
the
sure.
the Gen Z and millennials are now expecting kind of a new, and I think some of us who are a little bit older are kind of like, "Hey, let's get back to work," and there's gonna be some conflict there. I think the
Yeah.
key to all of this, and we'll talk about your book here in just a second, but I think the key to all of this is stopping for a second and
Yeah.
saying, giving the benefit of the doubt, or assuming positive intent, and just kind of saying,
Right.
"Oh, ooh, clarify that a little bit for me," and not jumping to conclusions and saying, because I think sometimes we do this, particularly in writing,
Right.
and it happens in speaking as well, is assuming negativity, right? Somebody writes something to you in an
Right.
email and you're like, "They're yelling at me," and you're like, "Would they be yelling at you if they were in person right now? Probably not," right? But we always
Right.
jump to that
Right.
conclusion.
Because we use our own filters, right? Which our
Right.
strengths do and all those other things. And when it's written, a lot of times when I'm talking about communication in some of my
Mm.
workshops, I'll put up two different post-it notes, and it has the same phrase, I will always find you. And one is written with little hearts over the eyes and like little girly, really curly type cursive. And you think, oh, I will always find you. Right? Like you read it in your head. It's
Right.
exactly how you hear it. And the other one has like blood dripping off of it and kind of jagged letters. And like, I will always find you. You're like, they're the same phrase, right?
Yeah.
But how we read it, so fonts matter, how we say things matter. And
Right.
I love Brene Brown's, when there's conflict. I love Brene Brown's phrase of the story I'm telling myself,
Mm.
because there's a lot of different ways to look at nonviolent communication. But I love the phrase, the story I'm telling myself. This is what happened. And the story I've created about that is this. Am I wrong? Am I off base? Help me clarify.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other person can come in and it kind of takes all of that accusation out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I was gonna actually do this towards the end of the program, but Marina brings up this question that, which I think is good as we think about cultures. Can you give an example of a difference in coaching expectations, just in the two, in a Latin America or Spanish, in English, maybe U.S. Those probably
mhm.
two the best. Can you give an example of maybe the difference expectations in those two cultures coaching?
I I think the different one thing I've noticed about the Latino culture, and I think it happens in the US too, but obviously having lived in South America, I'm always struck by it a little bit more, is one thing I would say is there's a lot more focus on weakness. They really want to improve whatever is wrong with them. And so it can be challenging sometimes to embrace that strengths concept, and that a weakness is in the strength, that it's not your bottom five. One of my first clients in Spanish said, "Oh, I think I do up to 23. I guess I just need to work on 24 through 34." And I was like, "Wait, no, that's not how this works. Hold on. Let's, go over this," right? He wanted to master all 34. That's not how it works. Let's work at that. There's also a language difference, whereas Americans are a little bit more receptive to the idea. It can be a little strange for them because, again, we come from sort of a deficit mentality, but it's a little bit easier to embrace, I think. And the other one I've noticed is Americans in general tend to be much more direct, tend to say what they want, tend to be right out there. And in Latin cultures, they tend to speak around things. They don't like to say no, but they think yes can be interpreted as no as long as you understand why yes meant no. And in other cultures, it's really obvious. Like any answer that's not yes is a no. But in Latin culture, it's not that obvious. And so it can be really challenging sometimes to get straight to the point, to get to the root of something, because there's a lot of sort of a lot you've got to work around to get there sometimes.
Listen, I'm the epitome of the American culture, and I've had friends tell me, Jim, you need to like ease into this conversation a little bit. Don't just and I get so many things going on so fast and so much. I'm just trying to get right to the point.
Oh, I write an email. It's on my head. I put it down. It goes in email. Right. Hey, Jim, thanks. Could you send me da 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 da? Thanks. Right. If I do that in Spanish, I have to be, hey, Jim, I need you to send me this. Thanks. And then I go back and I'm like, hope this email finds you well. How was your vacation? What did you do for the, I've got to go back and build the relationship and then go back in. So it's learning those and taking the moment. But I'm 12 years abroad and I still haven't mastered it because it's tough. It's who I am, but I recognize that that's a difference.
Right? I think it's good. I think it's good to understand, though, right? I mean, and that Raquel, who is part of Inner in Brazil, and I've been doing a lot of work with them lately, and she always begins her emails, I hope you're well, things, all these flowery, this is the best. And I'm like, can you just get to the point? Well, it's been funny. So I've been trying to change my emails to her to start with those same kind of things. Yes. It's not hard. It doesn't take long. And her response back to me is so much better when I play.
Relationship is everything in Latin America, right? You would think everyone has high building relationships because they all need that connection first before you get to business. So,
well, and not right or wrong, just understanding, right? Just understanding what the culture's looking for, or what
absolutely.
Marissa Ortiz and I had this great conversation just a couple of weeks ago around this, and it's just got me thinking, more of just like, I think some people approach it like, no, I don't want to change. I don't think you have to change. I think you just have to be a little bit more accommodating, and maybe that's changing just by another name, right? But
it's not changing though. And I always tell people, I look at strengths as, I mean, there are 34 words for me that have incredible power because there's an intrinsic language built into each strength, an intrinsic motivation, an intrinsic contribution, value, need, etc. And so when you can take just a second and look at somebody through what their need is, what their motivation is, and you keep in mind that most of us lead with positive intent, that and that differences are an advantage. Just because we're going to climb the same mountain doesn't mean we're going to climb it the same way. That's not necessarily a bad thing. One way may be more treacherous, we don't know, but it's not necessarily bad that we choose a different way to go. And so I love being able to lean into this language and say, I use analytical and empathy just because it's a really obvious sort of pairing to put. Somebody with analytical is going to approach somebody by saying, I think this is going on. I've seen, I've researched, I've done this. And someone with empathy can be, I feel like everyone's really, resonating different. And analytical might be like, I don't care what people are feeling. What do we need? And empathy's gonna be like, how can you not care what people are feeling? And why are the numbers so important? This is important, right? But if you can understand, you can actually enter the conversation, and empathy can go, hey, I've noticed this kind of feeling. What are you seeing on your side? And what kind of data are you seeing, right? And you open the pathways for a better dialogue just by using key phrases and key words that the other person is going to respond to. It doesn't change who you are, but it opens the dialogue and expands the filter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's just a great reminder. We did not intend to talk about this. This is not in our notes at all, but I appreciate
No.
the conversation because I think as we think about the cultural ramifications of coaching around the world, of doing this in a multicultural, perspective, I think these are important reminders to coaches to for those reaching out beyond their own cultures or understanding other cultures. I think it's a good reminder. You know?
Well, I know we're going to talk about the book. We're talking about practical strengths. My big why is that I want to teach strengths as a second language. And so I'm going to put this here because I feel like it's a great place. And for
Yeah.
me, the 34 talent themes are 34 words that 7.5 billion people on this planet share in some way, shape, or form. It is a simple, not a simple, I mean, it's complex in a way it is, but it's if we can just understand some basic tenets of 34 words, we can look at each other with greater compassion. We can improve our relationships. We can stop taking things so personally. We can kind of separate ourselves from the social silos we keep creating, I think, that are out there. We keep finding these ways to see how different we are. And I'm not like you. And we're using it to sort of silo ourselves. And I feel like we're losing community and losing tribe. And to me, strengths will allow us to celebrate the individual for who they are while recognizing the power of differences being advantages, right? Leaning back on that pillar of strengths and that we lead with positive intent and just give us
Mhm.
pause to, like you said, take time and look at each other. And so for me, there are 34 words that could change the world if we just, everybody could try to learn some basic version of them,
Yeah.
right? And understand themselves first because right? You need to know who you are first in order to really appreciate who somebody else is.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I love that perspective. I'm gonna bring the book up again, on screen. This is really, your second of 2 that you've put together, this one, just releasing here, this year. How
Mm-hmm.
is this different than the first one, and how is it maybe a little bit different than other strengths books that are out there?
So, a big piece of why I've always coached, language has always been important to me, right? And I've been trying to figure out how to make that part of what I do. And so it's always been a seed that's there. The books, the first one is on parenting, but all of the books in the series are essentially glossaries on how to apply your strengths in practical, everyday ways. It's almost using the wheel of life, which I hadn't really noticed until someone pointed it out to me. But like all the areas of the wheel of life, like, you know, habits and goal setting and career and family and relationships. And so all of these are how do we apply our strengths to have a positive outcome in all those areas? And what are some potential watch outs? What are questions we can ask ourselves to be more intentional about when we're getting into the darker side of our strengths or the less, the negative impact side, that hinder place. And I just really wanted something out there because I love what Gallup does, and Gallup has so many amazing tools for people to use. But I kind of felt like it was all really aimed at organizations. It was all aimed at leadership. It was all aimed, and I know that's been expanding over the last couple of years, but going back to when the seed of this was really born, right? Is like even strengths-based parenting was great, but it talked about kids and strengths explorer. I'm like, but I want to know what activator looks like for me as a parent. Like, how do I apply that? Right. So it was really born of just this need for a layman's terms book to apply this in everyday places of our lives where people feel like we might struggle and need some help doing it. That it's not, our strengths don't shut off when we leave work,
Mhm.
right? They're with us all the time, and they might show up differently in a professional space than they do in the personal space. I know they do for me sometimes, right? So being
Yeah.
able to help people with that was really important to me. That's the motivation behind this.
Love it, love it. You have a co-author on this as well. Do you wanna talk a little bit about Jennifer's contribution?
Jennifer was amazing. Um, yeah, Jennifer Doyle Vansel, she has been an amazing partner. And I will tell you, she is probably one of the best examples of a strengths based partnership because we share several strengths, but one we share is maximizer. But I have maximizer and activator, and she has maximizer and achiever.
Mhm.
So when I'm ready to just go, I'm done, I'm out, I've gone as far as I can, because mine's very ROI based. She's like, no, we got to go through it one more time and look for the little things. And I'm like, by all means, go for it. I can't look at it again. Right. And she did. And she found little things we needed to improve. So I'm very lucky that I had her to do that. But also having her with years of experience as a career coach and having worked in the university setting, I had her to um, support my ideas and to verify that, yes, that's what she'd seen. Yes, it resonated with her, help me with the questions that we came up with. And so that's what I'm looking for going forward, really, with a lot of my books, is to create those valuable strategic partnerships where, a lot of it is my thought, but I have a content expert to back me up, help me reshape it, help me make sure that I'm communicating the way I want to. And it really helps. On the first book, Rhonda Rossborough was my content editor with me, and I love her as a content editor because she has high learner, and so she doesn't insult my maximizer by going, "Why would you say it like that?" Right? She's always like, "I'm curious. What did you say just like that?" Or what was your intention about saying it like this? And so I'm always like, "Oh, thanks." Right? 'Cause I like to write once and send it off to someone else, and then I will go back. But my maximizer does not work on a perfectionist level like some others do, because my activator's just ready to keep going. So having a partner is really invaluable to me. It's absolutely necessary.
You've the second book has been out since May. The first book was released in 2021. What have you learned? What kind of feedback have you gotten from people on these? Do you get feedback? And what have you
I do
learned
get
through the
feedback.
process? Yeah.
The parenting book, I will say that was a very activator launch. I got it out there. I was just happy to get it done. And I did almost no marketing behind it. I didn't really try to push it. So it had great sales, the first month or so. And then it just kind of went down, and I left it. And I was moving to another country and doing other things. And so I just didn't do it. I really decided this year that practical strengths is where I need to focus. And so I got very serious about writing the career book with Jennifer and making sure we were going to get that out. So we got that out in May, and I've already outsold by far what I sold on the parenting. And people have gone back and bought the parenting book now that the career success book is out there. And I will say I'm very, very proud of the career success book, because it really has several applications. It's not just for people looking for a job. It's great for college students who are trying to figure out career trajectory and what they need, right? They might have high relationship building skills, but want to be a mechanical engineer. Well, you can do both of those things. It's just, what area of mechanical engineering are you going to want to focus on, right? What areas or opportunities are going to allow you to be part of a team or build relationships, or, right, and use both those skill sets. So I think that's been really helpful. It's actually become a management resource for a lot of people. With my corporate clients and a couple of other people, we're working on revising it only slightly to make it a manager's resource, so that they can help manage their career development of their teams and how people are progressing throughout their career. So it just has a multitude of applications, and I've gotten a lot of really good feedback. And I think my favorite feedback so far is honestly a very good friend of mine who knows her strengths, but she is not in the strengths world. She doesn't go back and look at it every day. And, she only knows about it because I asked her to do it. And she just recently had to apply for a job. And I said, well, get the book, look at your talents and everything. She said, you know what? It really helped me reshape my answers and do what I was saying. And it also confirmed that I was on the right track. She said, but it was really easy to read. And that was what was really important to me, is that these books are not just for people who are strengths literate, that someone who has recently discovered their strengths can still find this really helpful in a practical way. Right.
Sure. No, that's great. And so for our coaches, because most of the folks who listen to Called to Coach are
Sure.
certified coaches, not all. And if you're not, that's okay. We can get you
Right.
certified. Send us an email, coaching@Gallup. But what would be your advice? Because we see this in our social communities a lot, this conversation about careers.
Yeah.
This is my top 5, what career should I be in?
Right.
So as you think about a coach using this book as a resource, how would you encourage them to use your tool as a resource?
Well, I think it's really important because, like I said, and this was an actual client that I had, was the son of a client of mine who had 4 relationship building talents in their top 5, and throughout high school had been a mentor, and guided, younger students and had been involved in all kinds of committees and teams and doing all these things, but really wanted to be a mechanical engineer. And so being able to sit down and say, he can do that, but this is what he needs to look for. So the book is broken down into 4 very important categories. It still follows, there's sort of a Twitter statement that says, you thrive in this type of environment, or you need to find these things, right? So just a quick statement. We've got Gallup's definition. We have 4 things for you to celebrate, 4 questions to help you evaluate when you might be getting onto the raw side. And then there's 4 categories, which is what to look for, how to look for it, what to communicate, and then how to be successful the first days on the job. So how to succeed. And it's really great because you can have a role in mind, but you want to make sure you're going down the right path. So what to look for? If you have high empathy, you need to be in a place where emotions are acceptable, where people can express themselves, where you're able to possibly help people, where there's a more team and convivial environment. If you have high analytical, then you want something where you're going to have an opportunity to really prove yourself through data and proof and be practical and have an application and be moving forward, right, with what you're doing. And so it's important to that. And then how to look. A great thing for coaches, and this is something Jennifer really presses, and she just actually piloted a program with University of Colorado, I think with University of Colorado. If I said that wrong, please correct me, Jennifer.
She'll let us know in chat.
She'll let me know. She'll let me know. It was a university in Colorado. It was her university. But she piloted a program yesterday with career coaches. And one of the things that really struck with them was the how to search. Because me with strategic activator, woo, communication, I'm going to search very differently than someone with high intellection, deliberative, restorative, right? And so if I'm trying to coach, thank you, Jennifer. Sorry, Colorado State. I knew I said it wrong as soon as I said it. So they were like, oh, I'm coaching people, and we do that, right? We coach people the way we would do something sometimes. And we don't mean to, but to be really sensitive to what something they could do. And so being able to have that little paragraph in front of you to help you understand how they're going to receive and how they're going to succeed is really helpful for that searching piece. Then how to communicate is really good too, because it's how to communicate those values that your strengths bring to the table in your cover letter, your resume, in the interview process. What are some tips and tricks? And then how to succeed. It's how to start building your environment in a positive way on your first days on the job, what to watch out, a little bit of what to watch out for, but also how to really make the most of your talents and let them shine. And then there's 4 coaching questions for each talent, 1 for each category for anybody to sort of look at and reflect as they're building it out.
Joe, for that.
And I've had a lot of managers, sorry.
No, there's a little latency, but
no, I was just gonna say, I've had a lot of managers tell me that they've also used it for career development. It helps them ask better coaching questions. It helps them understand the needs of their employees from a different perspective, other than just asking the questions. It gives them questions to ask. So it's been really powerful in that aspect as well. So that's why I said it's just as good for job search as it is for career development and career paths when you're already in the job.
So if we had an individual who's had, they've taken strengths and they're asking that question of what should I do, or what kind of career should I go into, will it answer that question, or do they need some additional stuff as well?
I think additional things are necessary, because obviously you need to understand your skills. You need to know what you like to do, what you're good at doing, what is your skill set. And so I do think one of the assessments I lean into is Berkman assessment. I really like the Berkman assessment when it comes to career development and career decisions. Career coaches out there will have other ones, but that was one that really resonated with me when I was in a career shift many years ago. And it was very validating, but it's also one of those things that I think we forget how important it is to know how we're going to show up in the job. So we always say it's not what you do, it's how you do it, right? And that is very true. But it's also, what kind of environment do you need? What kind of environment is going to encourage you, to feed you, to help you keep wanting to show up? And so I think it's just as important to know what you want to do in the role. But I think when you look at strengths, it's going to give you more of this, what's the environment you need? What are the kind of people you need around you? How are you going to feel when you're there? Right? Some people might be more geared towards service-oriented positions or service-oriented organizations, right? Just because of the combination of the talents they have. Somebody else might be better at a startup or in a consulting position. I had one person I was working with a couple of years ago, and this was in Latin America, and he'd had his strengths and he saw a couple things out there. He said, I just want to talk to you. He said, everyone says I keep flipping from job to job and I can't focus and I can't concentrate. I just need to pick something. And I said, have you been happy with everything you've done? And he said, oh, I've loved everything I've done. I said, would you do it differently? Regardless of what people say, would you do it differently? No, oh my gosh, I've learned so much and I've done this. And I went, so be a consultant. He's like, that's what I've always wanted to be, but people think I'm crazy. And I said, but you're built for it, right? Like everything you've done has led you up to this. Your strengths support you in that. Now you might need to focus being a consultant in a particular area that really particularly moves you. Again, you might be for tech industry, you might be for startups, you might be for that, but consulting is really going to feed you and keep you going. And he wrote me after that and he said, I can't believe you confirmed what I've always known, but been too afraid to do. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I think that's the best part of coaching is we often just need confirmation and validation from a perspective outside ourselves. Right? We usually internally kind of know, but we don't have the ability to see it. I even tell people all the time, I said, it's like I'm in the middle of a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. I can get the side pieces together, but the rest of it's just a jumble and I'm kind of standing in the middle of it. And the coach is the person who has the box top and can kind of help you. Okay, let's group this together. What do you see here? How are you doing this? Yeah. Now it all makes sense, right?
Yeah. And sometimes we need to be challenged in the process.
Yeah,
it's not always about affirmation. Sometimes we need to be challenged in our assumptions.
100%.
Right. 100%. To be like, hey, have you really thought all the way through this? Are you, because I think sometimes especially in the career space, we may have family legacy that we get locked into or a cultural expectation that we get locked into. Right. And we think, oh, I have to do this. And you could challenge that. Just because your dad was a doctor doesn't necessarily mean you need to be or your mom was a doctor. Right. One of those kinds of things.
Well, and we always talk about the shoulds, right? That we always feel like we have these shoulds that we have to do, much to what you're talking about right now. And that should is often from a loving perspective, like you said, cultural, familial legacy. Your family wants the best for you. They're trying to guide you. Your teachers want the best for you, but they're all doing it from sort of their filter and what they think is best for you. It comes from love most of the time, right? But because of our respect for them, our love for them, we go, hey, okay, I'll do that. But inside we kind of go, not quite right. Like I can do it, but something's off, right? Like something's a little bit off. And so once you know your strengths, you may still be able to go that direction, but you're going to do it your way. And that the other should is that you admire someone so much that you think, I'm going to do it just like them. I'm going to be who they are. Again, a positively motivated should, but it comes from the wrong space. Mm-hmm. Right? So once we can recognize who we are and what we really need, when I do my language of you program, the most common comment I hear is, I finally feel like I have permission to be me. And I think that's mostly what most of us want. I don't think we lack confidence. I think lacking confidence is purely a symptom of a lack of self-awareness. And then a lack of self-appreciation, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have self-awareness with self-appreciation, the confidence just comes naturally. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think some people even feel very self-aware, but they don't really appreciate what they know about themselves. They don't see the positive side of it, right? And so when you can reframe things for them, they go, oh, that really is valuable. Maybe I should do more of that, right?
Sometimes they haven't seen good, positive examples of that in their own life, right? They haven't had folks around them that have been able to do that for them as well. And so they don't see it because they've never been taught how to see it.
Right.
And so great opportunity as coaches to see that. I want to talk about the future here in just a second, but what's the best way if I wanted to acquire either one of these books? Easy in the US on Amazon, but what's the best and easiest way to acquire these books?
They are only available on Amazon, and they are available in 11 countries maybe. So you can buy it on amazon.co.uk. You can buy it on amazon.mx. You can buy it in India. So It is readily available in other countries. I've just noticed something, and this is something I have to figure out. Jennifer was just trying to buy it when she was in Spain, and she was limited to only being able to buy 3 copies of the hard version.
Okay.
And so for some reason, certain countries seem to have limitations on how many you can buy. I'm not sure why. I didn't set anything up that way. So I'm trying to figure that out to remove those limitations, because there have been times people have wanted to buy them for a group, or
Yeah.
there's universities that have looked at buying these for their students as they're taking them through their already built strengths program for career development. So in the US, it's not a problem, but we did discover that when she was in Spain trying to buy it.
Books are, since I've been working at Gallup and watching our book, I don't have anything to do with our books
Yeah.
or the way we do books at Gallup, but it's it's a global challenge to get copies of books around the world in people's
Yes.
hands where they want them. And it's just hard. It's just hard work. I think that those barriers will come down as we continue to do what we do with technology
Yeah.
here in the future, but it always is difficult. And so, in the US store anyways, Practical Strengths is actually its own page on Amazon where you can see both books on
Yes.
that page. They do a nice job of doing that as
And
well.
as the series builds out, those books will be added to the series. So they are actually listed
Yeah.
as a series. Yeah.
That's awesome. Listen, I want to encourage you too. The Scott Wright, who is our licensing kind of guru at Gallup, pinged me,
As
and
book team.
when your book was launching, and he just, hey, I want to let you know it's launching, and he just had some great words to say about you and your partnership with Gallup in doing this. This is not an easy thing. These writing books is hard. Writing books where you're constrained, I'm putting that in air quotes for those that are
Yeah.
listening to it, right? You've got a strengths framework to work within. There's the
Yes.
licensing bit with us to get that done.
Yes.
But you're licensed with us. This is a
Mhm.
licensed book, which means we've gone through it and we're okay with it. But I just wanted to say thank you for doing it. It's not an easy task to do. I recognize that. Some people have come to me and said, this is not easy. And I go, yeah, I know it's not
Yeah.
easy. So thank you. Thank you
Oh,
for doing that.
I was so grateful to receive the license. I know it can be challenging. And so I just have to say how grateful I was to even receive the license, because it's a nerve-wracking process. It's
It's
not
not
just like,
easy.
hey, Gallup, I want to write a book. And you go, sounds good, go for it. Give us some money and we'll do it. No, it's quite a vetting process. And
Yeah.
so it was a little bit nerve-wracking, but I was over the moon when I got the opportunity. And this is just, like I said, it's not a job, it's a calling. And this
Yeah.
specifically with Practical Strengths is kind of why I feel like I'm here.
Well, great job. It's not easy. Great job.
Now.
To hear that from Scott means a lot. So it was like, oh, wow, awesome. So we wanted to make sure we celebrated that publicly so everybody knew that as well. And thanks for being a great partner. Okay. Lisa asks the next logical question, which I was getting to. What's next? So parenting, successful career success. What
Yep.
are you thinking,
So
if you can talk about it?
the next book is actually going to be on communication. And so it's really going to hit how our strengths affect the ways we communicate. And so I'm breaking down a little bit of that structure right now. I've got it mostly, but we're um, actually going to look at the domains first as a broad brushstroke. And there's some material that was out there from Jennifer Miller that I'm basing some of this on. Mary Sue Ingram has also been incredibly kind to share some materials with me from which I can build. I've been very lucky with partners out there in the strengths world who've been willing to share some resources that allow me to build my books as well. And so we're going to look at the domains first and really look at so executors, people who have high in executing, they show up, this is sort of their demeanor. This is how they show up. This is what we can expect from them. This is what kind of is. And then these are things, this is sort of a style that they communicate in, right? Like these are bullet point communication, those kinds of things. And then we're going to look at, possible questions or body language you're going to see from these people. What's going to possibly appear. And then we're going to give some little tips, strength by strength as well, with particularities for each strength underneath the domain. So it's going to have a little bit of a different structure, but not too much. They're all going to follow roughly the same formula. So communication is next, and fingers crossed that will be October 7th, because I'm always looking to launch things on the 7th, which,
Wow, that's fast.
thanks for being 7/7 for the call to coach. That was really super meaningful. So yeah, we're trying for October for that one. In the meantime, I'm working on the overall Practical Strengths book, which is literally titled Practical Strengths, 34 Words That Can Change the World. And it's my why behind this. We're including case studies like Leadership Rhode Island, like Children's Paradise Montessori in the Philippines. We've got a few, and we're looking at family. Again, we're looking at mostly practical ways strengths have been applied and built in to places to kind of give people some inspiration of how they can do this for themselves. So I'm building that at the moment. That'll probably take a little longer than I thought because, of course, my maximizer is wanting it to be better and better, and I'm building it. So it'll probably be next year before it comes out. Also, depending on other people to share their stories with me and making sure we have time for them to contribute. Another challenge of book writing. But then after communication, we're going to be doing next year, I will release relationships, and then habits and goal setting will be for next year. Which I always joke that that's the one that makes my activator sweat, because if you say the word goals or habits, I immediately like just reject anything you have to say.
Instant, like, no.
It's like, nope.
Not get. Tell me more about relationships. What are you hoping to? What will that one be about?
Relationships is actually going to look at platonic, professional, and romantic relationships, because I think we apply our strengths a little bit differently in each space, but we have relationships with everyone we come in contact with. So I don't want to do it just about marriage. I want to look at it from a slightly broader perspective, but it'll be platonic, professional, and in romantic.
I do like the approach that we're not assuming marriage in this, because I think sometimes we do, and in the past we have. I mean, there's been folks who have, and that's an appropriate place. But I love this idea because everybody has relationships. I hope.
Well, I mean, unless you're a hermit, yes, most of us have relationships with someone
and
somewhere.
It's okay if you are. It's okay if you're a hermit, but
it's absolutely okay.
For the rest of us, for the rest of us, I think it's an important. I mean, certainly, we spend a lot of time in our family talking about these themes in the context of our family relationship. It's the kids and how our kids interact with each other and how they see their place in the family through that. And so it's I think it's all good. So relationships and habits, right?
Yep. Habits and goal setting.
That's awesome.
And I think that's important because people are always like, I don't have any executing talents. And I'm like, well, you get things done. You just have a different motivation behind it. So we want to kind of show the semantics of habits and goal setting, because if you tell me habits, like I said, that's a 4-letter word in my book. If you tell me if you tell me to create a ritual, I'm 100% in. Right? Like, so, but it's the same thing, right? It's just sort of you call it for me. I mean, you can find nuances, but to me, they're kind of all the same thing. It's just whatever feels comfortable for you, right? And so I want to kind of get past this, that you have to have high executing to be a goal setter, right? You can have goals and have habits in relationships. You're just going to go about it a different way and have different needs on how you're going to get things accomplished. So we're going to explore that. And communication and habits and goal setting, Rachel Montverdi is going to be my partner on that one. She has a company called Strengths, Habits, and Leadership. So habits is really down her alley, but she spends so much time in the communication space too. So she's my content expert and editor for communication. Relationships, I don't have anyone. So if someone's interested, I'm happy to open that door and talk, because I don't have anyone specializing in that space yet. And then the other books that are going to come down the line in no particular order, we're going to look at, I'm trying to debate on the title of this one. So if anyone wants to help me with it, I want to look at spirituality and faith, and not from a religious perspective, but those core values and how we sort of move in the world from that philosophical perspective. So that's one. We're going to do health and fitness. And am I missing one? Was that 8 yet?
You're getting close. We're
getting close. Oh, hobbies and recreation. Hobbies and recreation, or recreation and free time. Mostly because I had a really weird awareness when I was playing Candy Crush one day that I'm like, this really feeds my strategic and my activator. And I noticed both of them, right? Like, as they show up, my activator goes in and starts moving things around without even knowing what I'm supposed to be solving for.
Right.
Right. But my strategic goes, wait a minute. You got a plan here. And then I start moving. So, but
right on. I think hobbies are big clues into our psyche, into our success factors. I think because we choose them, I think in a lot of cases, they're better indicators of future success than anything.
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
I think a good look at hobbies. I think sometimes we brush them off as, oh, that's what I just do for fun, and that's right. Like,
Yeah, exactly. But what are your
exa-
strengths that are being fed, right? That are being nurtured when you do
yeah,
that?
yeah, exactly. Couple questions on the way out here, just as we think about it. Marina asks, as you think about like partnering with us in this, any quick advice you'd have? So if someone's got a book in their head and they're thinking about doing this, and you've done it twice now, so we know you're successful.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give on licensing with us?
So the licensing process with Gallup, the way I would explain it at this point is you need to have a very good plan or a very good idea of why you are doing what you're doing and what value it is going to add to the Gallup Strengths world. And I know there are some careful factors because I've had people call me and ask me, like, hey, I've got this idea for a book. Do you think Gallup would go for it? Or what do I need to do to modify it? And, it really has to be very strengths focused. It has to have more of a global purpose. It has to fit the vision of where Gallup wants to grow. There were a lot of questions that, I'll be very honest, I do have command. So I like maybe forgiveness over asking permission, some things, but they ask you for your strategic plan, your marketing plan. How many books do you plan to sell? What are you going to do? And I said, my strategic can't even consider these questions until I know I have the license. And then I'm glad to give you this information, but like, I need to know that it's a possibility for really to invest in that. But I did have a plan. I had to submit writing samples. So I bidded for 4 different themes. I did 4 different talents, one for each for 4 different themes. And it was about a 6-week process to go through because I know there's a small committee that meets from time to time to do it. But really just be very aware of why you want to do it, what you want to do, and how it contributes to Gallup's vision for going forward.
Yeah, good advice. There's no one way, by the way, to get it done. I've watched dozens of these go through the process, and they're all
Yeah.
a little bit different, kind of based on what you're trying to do. So contact us if you're interested, or you've got more questions on this. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, and we'll get Scott back on the phone with you to talk about that. There's lots of nuances to it, and I don't want to
Yes.
take I don't want to take
Yes.
too much of your time. There was a comment in here from Donna, who said you might want to include service with hobbies, and volunteering or philanthropy or some of those ideas or concepts.
I can appreciate that. And that might even come into the spirituality and faith side. Like I said, I haven't thought through the structure on those quite as much. I do know the overall
Yeah.
topics. But I can certainly appreciate service and hobbies. And I know a lot of people ask me for sort of more specific things like selling that get more into more leadership type. And I'm like, no, that's Gallup space. I'm staying out of Gallup space, right? Like I'm trying to do things that
Yeah.
partner with and support without trying to compete in the space, if
Yeah.
that makes any
Yeah.
sense, right? Like
Yeah.
there's
Yep. It's
plenty
a
that's out
dance.
there. So
It's
it's
a
it's
dance.
a dance, but it's
Yeah.
it's also a
It's a dance.
choice. Like you could do one of these for teachers. I'm like, well, the parenting one actually works really well for teachers. If you are a caregiver of children or around children all day long, you can easily use that parenting book as a teacher
Mhm.
or someone
Mhm.
who is around children
Mhm.
and working with children frequently because the same types of ideas apply, right? They're actually pretty versatile when you really look at them from that perspective.
Yeah. Good. Anything going into the third book? Anything you're going to do differently that you learned about yourself? Because I'm sure each time you do this, you learn something new. Are you going to do anything different, or are you doing anything different?
I
Because
don't
you're
know if
writing
I'm
it
gonna
right now.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I am writing it right
Yeah.
now. I am definitely being more intentional about having the right strategic partners for
Mm.
each of those books. I think having the having a content expert, having someone who has spent time in the space, whereas I am doing this from a much sort of higher level in my understanding of strengths and what I've seen without necessarily expertise in the area, which is one of the reasons that kept me from doing these books for a long time because I wrote a parenting program. I have an entire 12-week parenting program, but I have taught other coaches how to do it, but I don't do it because I'm not a parenting expert, right? And so I stay out of that space, but I do know the language. And so when I really, in one of my coaching sessions, when I said, I don't know parenting, but I do know communication, it was like, ding, 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 ding.
There you go.
That's how I can approach it. But I can support coaches in those spaces.
Yeah.
By having stronger materials, by having resources, by providing them with tools in order to make their coaching better and more effective.
Yeah. Well, Gallup takes a similar approach. We try not to write books on things we're not experts on. We get a lot of pressure. Like a lot of folks, hey, you should write a book on. Sometimes we're like, we're not an expert on this. So I always appreciate that kind of point of view. Last question. Is there a podcast around these books? Have you created any kind of podcasts around them?
So there is a podcast in the works. Yes. I do have a podcast out there already. I did over 700 1-minute podcasts on strengths.
Wow. Okay.
I did 1-minute briefings. They're out there on Podbean, strongcommunities.podbean.com. I'm working on doing a file right now where it will be a searchable file for people that need 1 minute on strength. So you can use it for teams or fights and stuff. Again, something I put out there, did 2 years worth of 1-minute podcasts, have 500 pages written on strengths, and I've done almost nothing with it. So yes, that is out there. I am working on a practical strengths channel for YouTube, and we'll start actually bringing the people that share their anecdotes in the books. I'll actually be bringing them on to talk to them and their experience in learning strengths. So it is in the works. I hope to start by the end of this year. That might be ambitious, but definitely by the beginning of next year, that will be, I need an apartment first.
Yeah,
so I can have a studio.
Get situated. Don't try to start that now, but get situated and get that
going. It is in the works.
This kind of the content you're making is just perfect for podcasting, and to take the words on the page and blow them out into real world examples and interview people who are using it. It's just I think it's just a great opportunity to get talking about it as well.
Great. I'll be sending you an email.
There you go. Well, Joe, thank you for being on today, and congratulations on the books. And it's great to hear of all the things that are coming up here in the future. We're excited for you, and with you. I think you can see from the comments that are coming in to the chat that you spoke to some folks today. So appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate the time, and thank you to everybody who tuned in live to listen. Really appreciate that.
Joe, you hang on tight for me. And while I'm wrapping up, chat room, you can express your appreciation for Joe in the chat. So why don't you guys do that while I'm wrapping up, because you guys have heard this 1,000 times. We want to remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we do have available in Gallup Access. Head out to gallup.com/CliftonStrengths. You can sign in there for coaching, master coaching, or if you want to become a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach like Joe is, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. We'll get back with you with some more information. Find us in our Facebook groups, lots of conversation going on there. Facebook.com/groups/called-to-coach, all one word, called to coach is a great way to find it there. And we want to thank you for listening today and appreciate you guys being out there. Appreciate everybody out there who's live and with your questions. We'll be back with more of these Spanish tomorrow. Joe, maybe you can hang out in the chat room tomorrow and interact with us as we're doing the Spanish podcast. For those who listen live, thanks for coming out. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.